values, that someone is pushed to do it first. Often it's the people who cannot hide and have to show their values because they don't get a choice, or they are pushed into a place like Mr. Plumbeam was, where he had the choice to go back to the neat street or keep down the path of expressing himself the way he wished to express himself. When civil rights movements, like the movements for LGBTQ equality, things like Stonewall, which was the beginning of Pride, which was a riot against police brutality against people who were LGBTQ, that was led by trans women of color, by drag queens and kings, by butch lesbians, by flamboyant people who could not hide in a neat street. And because they were at the front, people who were hiding in their neat streets had the freedom later to express their values and live their lives and their dreams the way they wished. It's not easy to live out your dreams and your values and your life. Mr. Plumbeam didn't find it easy. His neighbors were mad at the beginning, and that often happens. Talking about my stained glass. So last summer, I was doing another project, which I won't show you because it is controversial and it's not the point of this particular homily. But I made it during the time when there were protests for George Floyd's murder. And I posted my in-progress work in a stained glass group. And they ran with it. I had hundreds of comments, nearly 400 comments, most of them negative, threatening me, telling me it was fused glass. I use a kiln for it. They told me next time I put my kiln on, I should get in it myself. I stood the course, and the moderator of the group deleted the immediate threats. But 6 months later, after the insurrection at the Capitol buildings in the US, I posted the completed piece. I said, sorry, I didn't post it because I moved, which was and was not true. And the second time I posted it finished, I got half as many comments, but nearly all of them were positive. It had taken a little while, but people had got from the fact where they still wanted to stay in that neat street to being a little more accepting and a little more pushing past and decorating their houses too. It can sometimes take time for that to happen. But what do I mean by living our values? It's not always creating art, although this is one of the ways I love to do it. For me, living our values out loud, or our dreams out loud, like Mr. Plumbeam, is taking what we believe in and making it visible to the world through our physical spaces, like our houses, our Zoom backgrounds, our congregations, our front yards, through our bodily presentation, through what we wear, through how we hold ourselves, and through our actions, how we speak to one another and what we do as we float through our world. So since we are all here together in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, I thought that I would talk to you about one aspect, because living your values could be your social justice values. It could be your culture. It could be your faith. And since we're in a shared faith space, I thought I would concentrate there today. See, now Unitarians, having grown up as one, I've noticed that we're not very evangelical. Now, I will make a big difference between evangelical and proselytizing. Evangelical is sharing the good news. Hey, I am part of a community and I really love it. Proselytizing is you should be in this community because otherwise bad things are going to happen to you. And we worry, I think, that we will come across as the other And so we hide our own values from one another. But for the past 10 years or so, I've worked for our faith. And so I don't really get to hide it. Not that I tried too hard in the beginning anyway, but when you live in foreign countries, first of all, they ask you why you're here. Then they ask you, oh, you're here for a job, what is it? And then you tell them you work for a church, and then you have to answer what kind of church and what do you do? And it becomes a conversation everywhere, at bus stops, at doctor's appointments, on dates, everywhere. When I started, I was in Tennessee, and so we had kind of three answers when I told them I worked for the Unitarian Universalist Church. It was in Knoxville, Tennessee, and so the church was famous because we'd had a shooting several years before. So everyone knew, or a lot of people knew who we were. So you get three different answers. One, I would tell them, yeah, I work for the Unitarian Universalist Church. Oh, we know you guys. Yeah, we love you. Great. The second, I work for the Unitarian Universalist Church. Oh, you work for that church. Not so great. And the third was actually the worst one. Oh, you work for a church? Oh, I've not heard of that one. Can you tell me more about it? And at the time, that made me nervous because I would gauge whether they wanted a Christian answer or a non-Christian answer. Were they pro-church or anti-church? And how do I respond? And I used to respond accordingly. If I thought that they were pro-church, I would tell them we were a liberal church. And if I thought that they were anti-church, I would tell them that we were a multi-faith community. Now, as I went along in my life, I realized that people really didn't have negative thoughts when you told them you were part of a religious community, not when you shared what it meant to you. And I became more comfortable with telling people what it meant, and more comfortable with, instead of distancing myself from, I'm not like that religion over there, because that religion I have negative connotations with, and I presume that you do as well, so I want to distance myself from them. But instead, saying, this is what my faith is. And I'll tell you the easiest way, in a nutshell, is to say, yeah, I was paid to go to Hawaii to learn how to teach comprehensive sex education. Most people kind of get the gist of what we do when you tell them that. And I much prefer to lead with something like that than what we are not. So as we go along, we're concerned that we might be proselytizing to people, but I found that this has opened up so many conversations with people where they talk to me about their faith, either one they grew up with or one they didn't. But their beliefs, their philosophies, we talk about God, we talk about nature, we talk about sin, talk about all sorts of things. And a couple of my favorite interactions have come from the nursing home, the assisted living, nursing home is not the right term they would want me to use, assisted living facility for seniors. And one of my favorite seniors was a man named Maurice. And I say was because I just quit my job last week. So Maurice is a little unsteady on his feet. And so sometimes we would escort him to and from meals. And he loves to sing. And so he would go through the dining room and kind of sing, and he would go to some of our nonverbal residents and sing for them, and they would smile and he would love it. And one day I came to work from a service, a Unitarian service, where they sang both I am open and I'm willing and comfort me. And so they were in my head, and that's what I was singing that day at work. And so as I was singing, comfort me, he joined in. And he joined in, and then I looked closely and I saw that he was crying. I said, Mo, what's wrong? I think you're a great singer. And he said, you're just reminding me of the sacrifice that Jesus gave for us all. Now, I don't identify as Christian, but I thought this was so moving. That song isn't explicitly Christian either, but it moved something in him that I was sharing my faith. He told me that he loves to sing, and he loves to sing most of all religious songs, but he was afraid to sing religious songs because it might upset people. And that he loved the fact that I sang religious songs because he could sing religious songs with me. I told him that yes, I told him exactly what I believed. Yes, Jesus did do amazing things. And Jesus was a great role model for us all. It's a powerful memory that he lives with us today. We talked about heaven, and I'll tell you, there are a lot more universalists hiding out there than you imagine. We were talking about heaven, and I said to him, Mo, you might not agree with this with me, but what I believe is I don't believe that there is a hell. And he said, oh, me neither. I said, oh, okay. And he talked about how people would be in heaven, his wife included, and we sang together. He asked if he could pray with me, and I said, of course. And I prayed that he would be bringing just as much joy with his song as Jesus brought with his message to people, and be just as meaningful. And I said that with my true heart, even though our theologies were different. I shared my values, and he resonated. He prayed that I found a husband because I'm 33, and apparently I should have found one by now. And that's okay. He can send those positive prayers my way as well. It was not just him. There was another woman I spoke about, especially about death, just something that seniors will talk about if you let them. Why not? It's something that would take up your thoughts when you may be closer to death than most people. And she was talking about heaven, especially because I happened to share the name of her sister who'd passed. And she was saying that she doesn't think people go to hell. Another universalist, I thought. I said, me neither. She said, I think maybe they just suffer on earth instead. And I said, well, I don't believe personally that people suffer because they've done bad things. I said, think of the babies that suffer. I don't think that's because they've done anything bad. And she said, yes, some people say that it's because of the bad things their parents have done. But who could do that? The poor babies. I don't believe that. I said, me neither. And again, both of us were sharing our values in ways that definitely would not have come aligned if you looked at us on paper. But we had meaningful conversations, and she was able to talk about her fears and worries and joys of talking about the afterlife and God. I found that this has been the case even with staff and colleagues and co-workers doing the belief-o-matic on the internet to figure out what kind of faith they might have and not understanding the questions. And then we talk about them. People talking about how they're atheists or agnostics, or their faith that they grew up with, that they struggle with, or their concerns with family members who they don't connect with because of their differences. But because I'm open with my faith, it allows them to be open with theirs. My house is me and I am it. It's where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams. Allow someone else to be in their house where they like to be and paint it to be all their dreams. So I have a challenge for you to think about what your values, what your faith, your culture, your social values, what pieces do you think that someone else who you know, even maybe quite closely, has no idea that you hold? And how could you let those be painted on the outside of your life? Because once we all get to do it, instead of living in our neat streets, we will all get to be on streets where the street is us and we are it. And it's hopefully where we like to be. And it will look like all our dreams.